Alright guys, welcome back. It's been a while, but I needed a break after that last fan film because it took a lot of effort. But if you haven't seen that, by the way, go check that out first, because this is a breakdown of that. So you're going to want to watch that fan film first. I'll leave it in the description below. Anyway, let's get started with the breakdown of how I made it. Alright, so let's just jump in with episode 1. If you want to know my PC specs, the CPU's a Ryzen 5 950X, the GPU's a RTX 3080 Ti, and I've got 32GB of RAM. So quite a beefy computer, but gets the job done. And if you're going into Blender and rendering, you're going to need good specs, because it will save you a lot of time. So here's episode 1. We've got a few characters around our scene. We've got this structure and a big cube filling it all. So things will come clearer if we go into render view mode. So we'll go the cube around our scene. So what was that? Basically, it's a noise texture plugged into an emission shader set to a yellow color. So go into shading mode. Here you go. So noise texture plugged into color ramp, goes into the strength of an emission shader and transparent for the surface. What this basically does is the background is just a simple HDRI that I've used. This structure here, it's basically just a sphere that I've subdivided a bunch of times, and then I've used the grab tool to kind of warp it a bit, and the inflate and clay strips brushes to just make these kind of weird shapes that I see in like some of the images from Phantom Menace. Then I've just made these doors separately, joined them together and placed them in the right kind of positions. As to how I get this fine detail, you can see if I go up close, there's a lot of detail here, so I'm not going to sculpt all of that. So what I use is a displace modifier with the noise texture set to strength of 0.5. So we've got a noise texture going into the bump map, into roughness and into color ramp. It's a really simple texture, but it gets the job done. It's pretty similar for the ground as well, except I used a Quixel Megascans texture. I'm going to be using Megascans a lot throughout this video. It's really helpful, gives you a lot of assets and textures for free. As for how I created these characters, well, Qui-Gon and Shmi Skywalker, they're actually just from images. So I've made the background for them transparent, then I uploaded those images to PifUHD. And what that does, it creates a 3D model of a person from those images, and that's how I got the models of Qui-Gon and Shmi. The textures don't look good up close. That's because I actually painted the textures on with the paintbrush and sculpt mode. However, it doesn't actually matter, because if we look through the camera view, the textures don't actually have to be that good, because they're in the distance. As long as you can make out who they are, it should be fine. R2-D2's from Battlefront 2, and I used a lot of models from Battlefront 2. It's probably the most useful resource I have for Star Wars animations. If you've got Battlefront 2, just search up how to extract models from it, 3D models, and you'll get a few tutorials. Just follow one of them. It's really great. For Anakin here, I didn't actually have a kid version of him in Battlefront 2, so this is just Luke from episode 4, and I've just changed the colours of his robes a bit, and I've morphed his face with the grab tool in sculpt mode. I'll talk more about how I animated the characters at the next scene, but for now, this is it for episode 1. Right, so episode 2. Let's cover how we animated Anakin in this, so if I let it play. So Anakin here, he's doing some pretty complex moves, and I didn't want to hand animate all of this because it would take a while, and I'm really not that good at hand animation. So I used this free online tool called Plask.ai. Basically it takes a video. You can take a video of yourself doing the animation, whatever you want, upload it to Plask, and it'll extract the animation data for you. So how I made Anakin here is, he's from Battlefront 2, but I changed the hair a bit with my own Blender hair particle system. Then I got his body, joined it all together, sent it to Mixamo and rigged him up. Then I took that Mixamo rig and put it into Plask so he could get his own animation. Then also got Obi-Wan model from Battlefront 2 and Yoda model from Battlefront 2. Made some adjustments to Obi-Wan's hair, make it so it looks like it's episode 2. But yeah, that's that's the characters for the scene. You see we've got some plants around here. Again, Quixel Megascans, really great for this. The Jedi kind of room is just a cylinder that I've just done some editing in edit mode, extruded out some bits, inset loops, loop cuts, stuff like that. But then we've got these kind of cubes going around our scene. These are the glass panels here. Our surface imperfection goes into a color ramp, which plugs into the roughness of the glass shader. You want to mix a glass BSDF with a transparent BSDF and use a shadow ray as the factor. What this does is it just makes it easier for the light to pass through the glass. For the background, it's just images of Coruscant, and I just cheated. Alright, so moving on to this Clone Wars scene. It's by far the craziest scene I've ever done. I mean, there's like 300 characters here, each with their own animations. As you can see, the render viewport's struggling to keep up because there's just so much going on here. To make the characters seem like they've each got their own individual animations and it's not just copied and pasted, I've offset just a few of the animations by a few frames. So what I've done is selected some of the rigs just by random. So if I select this one, so I select this one, and this one just by holding down shift, and then I go into pose mode and select all the bones by clicking A, and then select all the keyframes by clicking A, and then just press G, and then I can offset each of these animations by a certain value. So it looks like they're different from the rest of the animations. This just gives a lot more variety on what's going on. This is basically how the scene looks like. Each character's got its own animation, and they're not all just duplicates of each other. They all look different. For the lasers that are going around here, what's basically going on is there's a single vertex. You can see these little black squares. I'm not sure if it's showing up too well on YouTube, but there's these little black squares here. And these are around the Umbaran's guns. So these little black squares are just actually single vertices. That's how Blender is representing them here. And these vertices have each got their own particle system. So if I find one of the lasers, here's a clone laser. Basically it's emitting 60 particles over the course of this animation, and each of the particle has a lifetime longer than the actual animation, so it's not going to disappear halfway through. Particles are emitted from the vertex with a velocity of 100 meters per second, and they're just going to travel across the screen. So it looks like there's a spread of lasers going on, but since I'm doing it with the particle system, it doesn't mean I have to animate each individual laser. So you can see we've got quite a nice environment around here. So as to how I did this, basically it's just some plants that I found online. It's 3D models of Umbaran plants, and I've just retextured them. So I went into sculpt mode and I painted them with the paint tool. And as you can see, there's kind of black splodges here. So the black parts mean where these plants are going to be emitting light, and the white parts is where they won't be emitting light. So if I go into the material of one of these plants, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So I've used this black and white texture that I've made for each of the plants, put as a color attribute here. What the color attribute does is it's basically being used as a factor to determine whether it's going to be using this emission material here, or it's going to be using this standard Umbaran plant material that I've used down here. Now if we leave the scene like this, you can see it's just too dark. So what I've done is I've used some volumes here to cover the entire scene to make it look just a bit more cinematic, and so you can see what's going on. This ground fog layer here, which is actually just an emission shader combined with a gradient texture to get this, so it's just fog at the bottom here but not at the top, and I've set that to a bluish kind of value with a stronger strength than the emission shader that's covering the whole scene, which has a weaker strength but just illuminates the whole scene a bit better so you can see what's going on. And then finally we've got a volume scatter shader on the outside with a density of 0.01 and anisotropy of 0.5, which gives things a kind of nice glow effect going around them. I realise now I haven't talked too much about the camera animation stuff and stuff like that, so I'll talk a bit about that. So what's going on here is it's just some simple keyframes set to Bezier curves. You're meant to do linear, I think, but look, for this particular scene, Bezier proved quite alright. Focal length of 35, I always keep it like that. Usually I have depth of field on in these scenes, but for this scene it's a war scene and you want to see what's going on in the back just to kind of give you that sort of chaotic look, so I left it off for this particular animation. And yeah, it's just following Anakin around, so I just did a few keyframes. You want to make sure you don't have too many, so I've done one every 30 or 40 frames here. You can also see, if I zoom in on Anakin here, he's got this ring around him. So what this is it's actually a smoke emitter. You can see we've got this sort of torus shape around Anakin here. What this is, it's a smoke emitter. So when he does his heroic might ability in the animation, this is how I did it. So it's just a torus that I've set as emitter for smoke, and I just animated it scaling up. Alright, episode 3. This one was very, very heavy on the simulations. Right off the bat you can see you've got a smoke simulation going on. I'll hide that, otherwise we won't be able to see what's going on behind. But these are the lava sims. It took a lot of work to get here. A lot of trial and error going on. I'll just give you a quick rundown of the settings. So resolutions division 128. It's good to have a fairly high resolutions division, and UPRES factor of 2 for the mesh. I had the liquid sim start quite a bit before the animation actually started, just so we could get enough liquid into our scene. You can see we've got some spheres here. These are our inflow objects for the liquid simulation. Up here we've got our particle simulation, so it's just a bunch of sparks really just flying around in the air. It gives a kind of general ambiance to Mustafar. Right now you can see there's a bit of depth of field going on in the camera, so I've enabled that with the depth of field option here. So if we have a look, set to f-stop of 2.1 for this scene, and we've got depth of field on. So the camera's depth of field is locked onto this empty, and this empty is parented to Anakin. So basically the camera's always going to be focused on Anakin no matter where it is in the scene. The Mustafar environment here is pretty simple. This is just a kind of a lake that I've built. It's just a plane that's been displaced. It looks like lava. We've got some mountains here. Those we use with the ANT landscape generator. It's a free add-on for Blender. Really helps just quickly build out your scene. As you can see, we've got things that are grayed out if I go into render view mode. Now the reason that is because we've got this holdout option here checked on for the rest of our scene. So what this means is only the lava is going to be rendered, which is how I actually rendered out this animation, because I wanted to render the lava separately so I can composite it onto the scene later. But with the holdout option, whatever's in these collections will indirectly light the lava as well. It won't just be assumed to not be there. It will still light the scene, it just won't show up in the render. So it's a good way to render in chunks rather than rendering everything at once. You can render it separately with this holdout option, which you can go into filters and then toggle this on here. This just helps break it down and allows for more customizability and how you're going to separate your scene. But if I disable that option for now, you can see the sparks in the air, and now you can see our actual Mustafar scene. And here are characters, and if I unhide the background, there. So we've got a HDRI for the background, sunlight going on in here. Alright, the next scene was Rogue One. So this was Vader's hallway scene that we did. All these little planes in the scene. These are our spark emitters. So this is going off at frame 156 to 157. So right here, you can see that it's emitting a few sparks there. For Vader, he's got two cloth objects on him. He's got his inner cape here, and he's got his outer cape here. So firstly, what we want to do when working with these capes, we want to hook some of the vertices. So if you can see these edges here, you want to select them all around the collar and then hook them to a new empty object by pressing Ctrl H. Then parent that hook object, you can see here, parent that to Vader's neck. So whatever the bone is closest to the empty. Then once you've done that, you're going to want to add a weight paint group for each of them. So this is what it looks like for the inner cape here. And then you go into cloth properties and set I found these settings here work quite well, and then just put your weight group here in the pin group and set the stiffness so it's quite low, so it's able to move around freely, and you'll get these nice kind of flowing cape effects. But these rebel troopers, these are just Mixamo animations combined together, so they've got their general blaster firing animations that they'll do. So there you can see he's firing his blaster and then he dies like that when he's hit impact by the rebounding bolt. So that's basically a combination of two different animations that are going on. So he's got his blaster animation here, you can see, and then there's a gap here, which you can see here, and then after the gap there's his death animation from Mixamo. So I've just basically combine the two animations together so it looks like one cohesive animation that the rebel troopers got. For the actual environment, it's just a simple little design I did, probably with a plane, and I've just extruded it and built out this shape. And you can see these little modules on the side. It's actually just two things, so we've got this one here and we've got this one here, and I just built them out with just general modeling, and then I've just copied and pasted them across to make the 6 kind of panels. Then I've array modified that. So we've got the smoke simulation going on here. We've got a ton of spheres here acting as inflow objects, and they emit the smoke here just for the ground. There is a problem with this though. It creates a lot of noise in the background, so you're going to want to make sure you have quite a high sample count. So I've got 256 samples here, noise threshold of 0.1, and light paths I've got set to 3, and transparent always set to 32. These are the settings I used in pretty much every single Blender scene that I've done in this animation. Also make sure to have motion blur set to 0.5, it's quite helpful to have, and your color management set to medium high contrast. Right, now we move on to the simplest of the scenes, just episode 4. We've got quite a complex lighting setup going on here. So we've got a point light here, we've got 2 area lights here. I use the area lights more to highlight things, so you can see the back of Obi-Wan's robe here is highlighted. We've got the area light over here, which kind of gets these nice patterns on Vader's helmet, which I quite liked. And we've got a point light up here, just giving general light to the scene, just to fill it out. You can see there's just an image here for the background, so I didn't want to put in too much work modeling this whole hangar bay here, so I just used an image from Google, put it on a plane, and stuck it in the background, and it works quite well. Got these lights here, pretty simple to make, just put them on the wall. These floor panels and walls, they're just cubes with basic materials, nothing too complicated. The way I got Obi-Wan to disappear halfway through the animation is, he's got his basic material here, and he's got a transparent shader here, and I've just animated this mix shader to increase to 1, as you can see here, and now it's switched from his base material to a transparent material instead. We play the animation, we can see his lightsaber drops, and so does his cape to the floor. So the floor is just a simple collision object. We've also got a rigid body passive object here, just makes it easier for stuff to collide with. Got the lightsaber as a rigid body object, and his cape is cloth. The episode 5 render, I've actually already done that in a previous video. It's how I made this cinematic scene from The Empire Strikes Back. I'll leave a link to it down below. Alright, episode 6. So I've just got this kind of throne room scene going on here. In the back, I've just duplicated the scene from over here and just put it over here, so it just fills out the scene a bit better. More of the same stuff for the rest of the scene really. The only really unique thing going on is the Emperor's lightning. So what we've got here is it's a bunch of empties, and each of the points of the ends of the lightning is hooked to one of these empties, and I've just animated the position of the empties so that they move from target to target. So right now they've moved from Luke to Vader, so when Vader holds up the Emperor, the lightning also moves towards Vader. I've also got another empty here that controls the displacement of the lightning, so you can see when I move the empty, it looks like the lightning's moving along with it. How it actually works is it's the displace modifier set to object coordinates, and the object is one of the empties. The texture I'm using is just a marble texture. This one's pretty simple. All of this environment was built through Megascans. These pine trees you can see here in the back, these were built from the ET render I did a few videos ago. We've got these logs here from Megascans. I've just made them into this kind of resting place for Darth Vader. Vader's here, just put him into kind of resting pose. He's not animated, neither is Luke actually. Some embers going up into the sky. We'll see if we can look at them. And then the main centerpiece is the fire here. So how this actually works is we've got resolutions divisions of 64, and as you can see here, it's quite low resolution, but we've got a noise factor of 6. Now the reason we've got low resolutions division is it doesn't actually need to be that high. Here are the particles, the embers that are flying into the sky, just another particle system. Yeah, Brownian motion, that's the key thing for embers. You want them to move randomly, almost like snow. So yeah, this is the scene. Have a look at it in render view mode. You can see here we've got the holdout option and everything but the fire, because I rendered the fire separately to everything else, just so I could control it better and more easily in Davinci Resolve. Another thing I haven't mentioned is when you export this render, it's as an OpenEXR file. That's really important if you want to have good color correction in Davinci Resolve. I also exported the renders at a lower resolution, so 1920 by 817. Normally this would be 4K, but I've exported at 2K. The reason is because Polyford put out a new tutorial where you can basically upscale your render times, upscale your renders from 2K to 4K. It's in his glass animations video. Go check that out if you want to learn about the software on how to basically AI upscale your renders. It's really beneficial and save you a lot of time. So here is the Davinci Resolve file that I used for this kind of animation that's going on here. So if we scroll up, we can see we've got some Quixel Megascans surface imperfection textures as video channels. Now, how this works is it's basically being used as the overlay setting, set to a really low opacity of 8. Crank this up, you'll be able to see what's going on better. So it's like little surface imperfections on the camera that are being shown up here. Put them down at a low level, just so that these surface imperfections just barely make their way into the render. So for each of these animations, you can see you have most of the time I've got 2 of them. So for example here I've got the normal one, and then I've got the one with the fire. So I've just combined them in Davinci Resolve here. Here is without the smoke, and here is with the smoke. So I've rendered the smoke out separately for each of the little blocks of animation that I've done. Then I've color corrected them in Davinci Resolve. So if we choose this one, I've changed some of the curves and maybe made them more of this shape. Sometimes I've changed the offset values here, made them more blue in case of this scene. It's just minor tweaks like that. Right, final bit was sound design. So we've got the music here, and then all of this, there's a lot going on, is just sound effects. So we've got lightsaber sound, we've got blasters, we've got just clones shouting in the background, we've got explosions, lava explosions. This is about timing it right really, so it matches with the video. And a good tip is, when you're looking at the sound, you can see this pan thing here. So I've got this set to -37 here. That means it's going to be 37 values towards the left. So if I slide this to more towards the left, in your left speaker, the sound's going to be louder, and your right speaker, it's going to be quieter. If I do slide it to the right, then it's going to be louder in the right speaker, quieter in the left speaker. This just kind of builds up the sound in the scene and allows you to layer sounds over one another more easily. Alright, so that's the breakdown of how I made this Star Wars animation. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. If you've got any questions, leave them down in the comments. I'll be sure to answer them when I can. The next video I'll do, it will be a procedural city generator video, so you'll be able to generate entire cities with people and cars and traffic systems, all of that procedurally, any city in the world, and I'll have that out shortly, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I'll see you guys in the next one.